Okay, let's talk about phase 2 of the force cycle. The force cycle, force is an acronym standing, each letter standing for a separate phase in a cycle that will allow you to build spoken proficiency in your target language. And my previous video was talking about the F in the force cycle, which stands for focus. And I said that you need to have a tight focus for the next element of your target language that you are going to master. And so today I'm going to talk about phase 2, which is organize. In the organization phase of the force cycle, you will collect vocabulary and phrases that you're going to use to talk about and to interact with somebody about the topic that you've selected for your focus. Remember that your focus can be a grammatical element or a language pattern, in other words, or a theme that you're going to talk about. Collecting vocabulary and phrases is not learning by itself. Just because you have memorized some words and you've got some sentences that apply to your focus, that doesn't mean that you've learned them. It's only a step that you use in preparation for speaking and for actually using your language in live conversation with a native speaker. Learning words and rules and vocabulary and even language patterns does not internalize the language for you. At some point, the language has to be automatic for you. It has to be something that you've actually worked into yourself and that you can use spontaneously and, as I say, to interact with people, not simply to make a speech or to talk at somebody. You're going to talk with somebody and interact. So the purpose of the organization phase in the force cycle is not to learn all the grammar that's involved. You may use some fairly complex expressions, but you don't necessarily understand the grammar of what you're saying, even if that's what's found in your textbook. In the force cycle, your goal is simply to have a meaningful exchange with somebody. And at the earliest levels of proficiency, you'll be happy if you can do that, and you don't necessarily need to have advanced grammar skills. You will not become bilingual by studying rules more intensely. Now, I'm all for studying grammar, and my students tell me that I explain grammar rather well, which is interesting to me because I never thought it would be something that would be a part of my teaching skill set. I enjoy talking about grammar. I find that having some terminology really speeds up the process, so you don't have to use elaborate explanations to say what you're getting at. You've got some terms. But remember, grammar, all grammar is identifying some patterns in your target language and giving them names. So for example, in Spanish verbs, you've got endings on the verbs. In the present tense, you'll see that there's almost always an O on the end of a verb, and that means I, whatever. I work, trabajo. I write, escribo. I live, vivo. That O ending, that tells you that there's a pattern there. So you give that name a pattern. We call it conjugating. So don't be freaked out by grammar. Don't be intimidated by it. It's a useful thing. But studying grammar alone will not make you bilingual. I've got an Italian book here, Teach Yourself Italian. This is a great book. But if you worked your way through this book and memorized all of the rules in the book and all of the vocabulary that's in it, that doesn't make you bilingual. Something else has to happen. And that's what we're talking about with the force cycle. How do you get that information out of a good book like this one and internalize it and make it part of your ability to use Italian spontaneously and on the fly? What you're doing is you're gathering the bricks for your construction project. You're taking these elements of the language and you're bringing them together so that you can build a model of the language within yourself, so that you can operate out of that model, out of a complete version of the language that is within you. You will learn to speak the language by speaking it. I'm fond of the expression speaking to learn. I know it doesn't say everything, and I know that there's a learning element to what goes on, but at some point you have to be using the language in order to make it your own. Normal communication is only possible with internalized language, with language that you've really have some mastery of. And internalization is only possible through using the language. So more studying and memorizing tables and paradigms and endings on words and nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative cases and all of that sort of stuff. I find that kind of stuff interesting. But just because you know all that doesn't mean you can speak that your target language. Something else has to happen. Some other language learners and teachers use different words to say the same thing, I think, something very similar to what I'm saying. They'll often talk about there's a passive phase and then there's an active phase, and you do certain things to activate all of this knowledge of the language that you've been accumulated. One of the things that I do that not everybody does is I activate all the language as I'm going along. As I'm acquiring language, I'm activating it at every moment, and that's what the force cycle is all about. So here you're organizing some information that you're going to use to talk about the focus that you've selected. So it won't hurt you to learn long lists of grammatical rules by heart and memorize paradigms of verb endings and noun declensions and all that sort of thing. But it won't help you that much either when it comes time to speak, because there's just not enough time for you to stand there and call up these tables of word endings in your head and to make correct decisions about how you're going to apply them and to construct a meaningful sentence and then finally to speak it at a reasonable speed. The other person who's standing there talking with you is going to be kind of frustrated if they have to wait for you to do all of this mental gymnastics. It's even worse in reverse. If you're trying to listen to somebody and you've memorized a whole bunch of grammatical rules and you have to hear correctly what they've said, first of all, just even to hear it right, then analyze all the words and figure out what kind of grammatical structures are being used, and you're calling up tables and charts in your head and hoping that you've remembered enough of the rules to be able to make sense out of the information that's being spoken to you. And then you have to work out the meaning of what all of those various endings and so on mean, and then respond at a normal speed in conversation. That is really hard. So studying rules alone and even memorizing vocabulary is not enough. You have to do something else to get the language into you. So you select your focus, and then you start to organize some material that you're going to use to talk about it. And this is this second step that we're talking about. And we'll go through the other steps, and that'll complete the pattern. So you'll have to watch all 5 videos to understand what I'm talking about in the force cycle. When you are in the organization phase of the force cycle, you want to collect a list of words that suit your topic. For example, if you're going to go buy a guitar in Spanish, you're going to want to know some basic words. Nylon strings and steel strings, frets, what kind of material is the guitar made out of, and you'll learn some guitar terminology, the tuning pegs, the fretboard, the shape of the guitar, the brand names, ¿cómo se dice brand name in español? So you prepare with words that you expect and anticipate that you'll use when you go out to buy your guitar in Spanish. And you prepare not just isolated words, but phrases, because words that relate to your focus are found in groups. You want to learn not just how to say things that you think of in your first language and then just translate them word for word into your target language, but how do Spanish people talk about guitars? What are the phrases that they use? What are the expressions that they use? And get some of those and be ready with some of those so that you can talk in a normal way when you go out to buy your guitar. You want to have words and expressions that are short enough that you can manage. You don't want to try and memorize big long paragraphs or something, but simple phrases, simple words that you'll be able to use at a relatively normal speed and a natural sounding rhythm. In the next step, you'll be practicing these words and phrases as you make them your own, and you prepare yourself to go out and use this material in your live interaction in the target language. You can borrow and steal useful words from all kinds of sources. You can take them from your textbook. You might have CDs or some other kind of recordings that you listen to. You can watch some YouTube videos. Especially what you want to try to find is material that talks about the focus that you have selected. and stuff that is done in your target language. You could read some Wikipedia articles. You could read some advertising. You know, search the Spanish word for guitar. Search guitarra on the internet, and read a few articles about guitarras, and learn all the vocabulary from that, and pull phrases and words that will make you sound like you know what you're talking about when you speak about guitars in Spanish. You can listen in on conversations that you overhear. If you're fortunate enough to be buying your guitar in Mexico, hang out in the music store and listen to what other people are saying, and steal the words and listen in and see how they talk about guitars, and put that together and prepare that material, collect it, so that you can organize the words, phrases, and vocabulary and the language patterns that you'll need to prepare for fulfilling your mission, which is to get this guitar using only Spanish. You can take vocabulary also from movies. Recently, I've been watching a bunch of James Bond movies in French, and trying to pick up on how French people would say things that I hear in Bond movies, not how an English person would translate it using. I always talk about, you know, speaking English with French words. That's not the same. How do French people say the things that James Bond says? So watch a movie in your target language and collect some words and phrases, especially if you can find some things directly related to your focus. Listen to the radio and watch the TV, and watch the TV, listen to the radio with a writing pad. Write the new material down by hand. Now, I love using my iPhone, and I've got a laptop and all these other things, but there's something special about writing by hand. There's something that connects this information that just seems to transfer it into your brain in a different way. Writing by hand is something that I do in almost no other part of my life except language learning. So I recommend, you know, a writing pad, and I like those pens that have 4 colors in them, where you've got red and green and blue and black, and I color code all my notes when I'm writing out vocabulary lists and learning a bunch of words related to my focus. I'll write the English part in blue, and then I'll write the target language stuff in red, and it just helps me keep it organized. So that's my pen of choice. There's my endorsement for whoever the company is that produces those pens. Those are very cool. You can ask acquaintances who speak your target language to help you get some words and phrases together to talk about what you want to do and to achieve your goal and to fulfill your mission in your target language. But one of the things I've learned is don't ask people to translate something that you say. Don't ask them to say, you know, I would like to buy a guitar, you know, for my friend's birthday. They will translate exactly word for word what you said in English. Say something different. Say, tell me how you would shop for a guitar in Spanish. And let them say it their way, with their word order and their word choices. You'll sound much more natural if you don't speak English with Spanish words, but if you speak Spanish with Spanish words and you talk like a Spanish-speaking person. So it's important to ask the right way. If you have a speaking coach that I mentioned in one of my other videos where I talked about teachers, coaches, and fish, I said that a speaking coach is not somebody who's going to teach you language, but is going to give you natural language samples that you can use in your force cycle. A dictionary can help, especially a good dictionary, because better dictionaries have head words and then they have sample words and phrases below. So you'll find, for example, you look up the word trunk in a foreign language dictionary, and it says that there is a number of words for trunk. There's the trunk of an elephant. There's a trunk that you store all your things in. There is a trunk on the back of a car, at least in Canada we call that a trunk. Many other words for trunk, and then it'll give you some sample phrases. To pack your trunk, to take a spare tire out of the trunk, and you might get some phrases that you can use. So look for dictionaries. When you are shopping for dictionaries, by the way, look for dictionaries that have a bunch of sample phrases afterwards. That can be so helpful when you're trying to sort out which word for trunk am I talking about? The trunk of a tree, or the trunk of the human body, the trunk of the car, the storage trunk? And a good dictionary will help you with that. But you need that kind of information in order to use words with any confidence in your force cycles. In your first attempts at a force cycle, you will only reproduce language samples that you have been able to collect more or less in a word-for-word way. You will repeat things that you have found in books or that you have heard and listened to. You're not really going to be, at the earliest stage, combining the stuff that you know into new sentences and saying new things that you haven't heard somebody else say before. But that's great. Just get the flow going, get some talk going. So if all you do is memorize some phrases out of a phrase book and you head down to the guitar store and you say, how much does it cost? And you've memorized cuánto cuesta, and you just repeat simple things. That's great. At the novice level, you're getting the flow going, and you don't know that the verb cuesta is the third person singular of a first conjugation present indicative verb that has a stem change in it. You don't know all that grammar stuff, and it doesn't matter. Just get the flow going. Start talking. Start using your target language. And later on, yeah, it'll be very interesting to look at that stuff. And once you've got the language flowing a bit, then it's good to look back at the grammar and say, what do you call these patterns that I'm noticing? I'm noticing that there's this vowel change in this verb, and that it's a verb. And now I know what a verb is. Isn't that cool? But don't worry about it at the beginning. Just get the language going. Go out and use your language and keep these cycles happening. Later on, you'll be able to modify, learn samples, and recombine things and say things that you haven't heard somebody else say before. At the beginning also, you'll find that the material that you organize in this phase of the force cycle will be a very small amount of information. For example, my Chinese, which is so brand new to me and so different from any other language that I've learned, it's a real challenge to get into a tonal language and a language that doesn't have, isn't normally written in a script that I know. So I'm reading pinyin and the romanization form of Chinese. That's tough. I'm trying to control my tones so that I can be easily understood. And the amount of information that I go out with to fulfill a force cycle is a very small amount of information. I want to be able to go up to the counter in the coffee shop and say, good morning, how are you? I would like a cup of coffee, please. Big one. Thank you. And that's about it. That is a total language workout for me at this level of proficiency in Chinese. Now, when I go to order something or have a conversation, for example, at a higher level of proficiency, I'll have a lot more material organized. This last weekend, I met with a friend and spoke Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, for a little over an hour. Well, I had lots already on hand, so I could speak fairly well in Portuguese. But I prepared because I wanted to talk about my experience as a student of Portuguese and my experience as a language teacher. So I was interested in words like, one of the new words that I learned this week was the word sotaque. Sotaque is like an accent, not an accent mark, which is, first I started using the word acento because I was trying to steal something from Spanish. But I was there with a lot more prepared material, talking about slang, talking about accents, talking about proficiency and all of these other things, because my proficiency level is higher in Portuguese. I still think that you should limit the amount of information that you put together in the organization phase of a force cycle to a maximum of a page or two. Shouldn't be more than that. If it's longer than that, your conversation is probably too long, and it's going to be tiring for your conversation partner. So keep it fairly short, and it will be affected to some degree by your proficiency level. There are no shortcuts to advanced proficiency. You can't take your language book and turn to the last few pages of the book and memorize something really fancy and complicated and think that somehow that will allow you to acquire and internalize and master that feature of the language for you. The truth is that you will master your new language in a very predictable way for the most part. At least this is my belief. I think that we acquire certain skills before other skills, and it doesn't even matter what order we study them in. It doesn't matter what order they're taught in. Some things just come before other things. You will find that you move from simple things to more complex things. So at first you go to the to the restaurant and you say, hamburger, please. Fantastic. Novice level, spoken proficiency. If a hamburger shows up on the table in front of you, you have passed. Fantastic. That is a successful force cycle. Well, that's a pretty small one, but that's the idea. That's success at the novice level. Little later on, you want to say, I want a hamburger, please, with French fries. And if you get a hamburger and French fries, fantastic. At a more advanced proficiency level, you start specifying what you want on it and combining things. And do you want your hamburger to be a little rare? Do you want onions on it? And then all your customized drink for your customized order for your drink. I want a half ice and please bring me a straw. But you move from the simple to the more complex. That's just how it goes. It doesn't matter what you study or how fast you study. You're going to say simple things before you can say complex things. And you will also say general things before really specific things. So one of the first things that I learn in a new language is the word for a container. Because I still find naming all the different kinds of containers in Spanish quite difficult. And my Spanish is pretty good. But, you know, you think of, okay, there's cartons and boxes and Ziploc bags and Tupperware containers or that style of container. There is just a myriad of words, the kinds of things that we get sour cream in and the screw tops and all of these containers. Well, then there's just one good generic word, general word that'll cover a lot of ground. It's not all of them, but recipiente. Recipiente, a container, some generic kind of container. You will find that you will learn some generic word before you learn all the specific things. You'll be able to say vegetables before you can name all the vegetables. You'll be able to say meat before you can specify veal and steak and chicken breast and filet mignon. So simple to complex, general before specific. And you will also find that some parts of the language are just not accessible to you until you have mastered other parts. So for example, in Spanish, you'll learn the verb estar so that you can talk about using what we call in English the present continuous tense. Estoy trabajando, estoy escribiendo. You need the verb estar, and that is simpler. That's going to be early on before you get to the more complex things. So expect that. And recognize that your progress in your force cycles will reflect that you've got some things you got to learn before other things. As you organize material for interaction with your target language community, you need to anticipate something about how that conversation's going. What are the things that you expect that you would say when you buy a guitar in Spanish? What are the things that people ask when they buy guitars? What material is this guitar made out of? Is this what kind of strings do you use for this guitar? What kind of neck construction? How about tuning this guitar? All of these sorts of things. So expect that, and then think about what is the other person probably going to ask you. They'll say, what is your budget? What style of music do you play? What type of guitar do you prefer? Are you a beginner? Are you advanced? So you think through and you imagine, how's this conversation probably going to go? And that helps you organize the material that's going to tie into your focus. If you're going to ask how much something costs, you have to anticipate that you're going to hear numbers. You have to be ready to hear the name of the currency that you're buying your guitar in. So think ahead and plan ahead and make sure that you come somewhat prepared for this event. And realize up front you're not going to know everything that you need, and you're going to think back, oh man, I wish I had those words when I went there. But that's great. That sets you up for your next force cycle. Don't buy the guitar the first day. Go back a second time and say, oh, now I'm ready. Now I know how to say this or that I couldn't say the last time. And you drag out your purchase experience a little bit just so you can improve your proficiency in buying stuff in Spanish. Try to anticipate the questions that the other person will ask you, and so that you can have some responses ready. What is your budget? How long have you been playing the guitar? How will you answer those questions? If you don't anticipate the other side of the conversation, you end up with some really funny experiences. I I think it's funny that sometimes we buy a phrase book and take a trip to Quebec and open up the phrase book and look there and says, where are the bathrooms? Où se trouvent les toilettes? And then the other person starts to tell you, oh, the bathrooms, you go down to the 2nd Street, turn left, go up the stairs, go to the red door, but don't go in the red door. Go to the blue door that's beside the red door and ask Frank, who's sitting there at the desk, and he'll tell you where the bathroom is. It's not hard to find. It's around the spiral staircase. And you get this big, complicated explanation of how to get there, but all you did is read this question, where is the bathroom? You have, if you are going to ask that question, you better know at least a little bit, right and left, upstairs, downstairs, that way, really close, because when you got to pee, you don't want to be trying to learn all the direction words out of your phrase book. So anticipate what the conversation is probably going to be like. It is far more important to use your target language regularly than it is to produce complex and perfect speech. One of my favorite expressions, and I'll probably repeat myself a lot in my videos, is that clear is better than clever. So sometimes you want to say something very fancy, but you have to step back a little bit and say, I don't have the vocabulary for that. I don't have the language skill to do that. But I could say something very simple. Where is the bathroom? Close or far? That way or that way? Upstairs, downstairs? And so you step back and you say, wow, I wish I could say something fancier, but I can't. It's okay to use disjointed words and phrases. You know, as long as you can get the meaning across. You want to focus on being comprehensible and intelligible, but not on speaking perfectly. You know, when you speak your own language and you listen to a conversation in your own mother tongue, it's very common to break grammar rules. It's very common to speak in incomplete sentences and to start something and finish it without actually completing all the words that you might do, because the other person who also speaks your mother tongue as their own first language, they know what you meant. So if you speak in short phrases and incomplete sentences and just put a few words together but somehow get the job done, that gets the language flowing for you. And the language that you have flowing and the language that you are using is the one that will improve, and it will get better, and your proficiency level will go up and up. Start off simple, make lots of mistakes, talk a little bit like Tarzan, but this language will grow for you if you're just using it. Keep yourself in the flow of the language. If you use short utterances, that's normal. That's what we do in every language. It's all right to speak in very short little sentences, especially at the lower levels of proficiency. Even the most basic and sacred rules of grammar and of grammatical respectability are routinely broken by native speakers. So you can do the same thing when you're speaking somebody else's language. You mess up the grammar and you put some words together, but you get the result that you expected. That worked. And because you did that, your proficiency level will rise. If you went out every day and said, how are you, in your target language, the first person will say fine. The next person will say great. The next person will say, I'm okay. So you went out with how are you, 3 words, and you come back with 15 or 20 different responses to that question. Your language proficiency or the elements of this language have increased dramatically for you. That's why you use the force cycle, is to engage with the target language community and increase your proficiency in a natural way with expert speakers that you're not even paying. Mistakes are great. Don't be hard on yourself when you make mistakes, because that suggests to you where your next force cycle might be. You went out to buy a guitar and you got lost when you started talking about materials. So your next force cycle might be discussing the materials that are used in the guitar that you want. So use your mistakes and enjoy them if you can. The next phase in the force cycle will enable you to prepare yourself to use the material that you put together in the organize phase. This next phase is rehearsal. So I will talk to you about how you prepare to go out and engage your target language community on a specific focus with the material that you've organized in the organizational phase. But before you go, you want to do some rehearsal. Your conversation partners will appreciate it. I'll see you in the next video.